The number one thing you will do the most in the majority of video games is move. It's how we go from point A to point B on a map, how we approach or escape danger, and how we finish any level. Anything from Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo 64 to Ghost Runner uses movement as the baseline of its gameplay. So why is it that most movement system in games is so unimaginative, so boring and repetitive? My favorite games all use movement as a form of self-expression. Of course, movement should first and foremost characterize the player character, which is why, for example, Corvo Attano from Dishonored moves differently to how Peter Parker in Spider-Man moves. Yet both games have phenomenal movement systems. The movement system is the most important way that you can engage a player while communicating the narrative and the character as efficiently as possible. Few games, however, have done it better than Assassin's Creed, in my opinion, especially when it comes to third-person parkour. This is the franchise from which Outlaw's Vengeance will get inspired off when it comes to movement. For those who don't know, Outlaw's Vengeance is a stealth action game inspired by Assassin's Creed and Dishonored. In it, you play as Silas Ridge, an ex-assassin who hunts down the governors of New Aurelia after a failed revolution. It's available to wishlist now through the Steam page, although it might be looking like a bit mid depending on how far in development you see this video. But still, if it sounds like a cool game, throw me a wishlist for the Steam algorithm gods, since they seem to be pretty judgmental. Third-person parkour is something that I believe has been underutilized in games, and it's a feature that I want to bring into Outlaws. Sprinting, vaulting, manual jumps, catch ledge, beam jumps and swings, all of it, to give Silas the ability to reach any part of the 4 cities of New Aurelia. This is a world that is designed to be extremely vertical in its level design. It has very claustrophobic streets that makes you want to go upwards into tall buildings that have many beams and bridges and platforms connecting all the rooftops. If you want to learn more about the nature of these cities and the country of New Aurelia, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter where I'll send you lore dumps on different topics surrounding the world of Outlaw's Vengeance, and the link is in the description. But when you're making a game, especially a game like this, we need to begin with movement. And as the saying goes, one must learn to walk before they can run. One thing that sets games like Assassin's Creed apart is how they animate their characters. Ubisoft pioneered in 2012 with Assassin's Creed 3 a technology called motion matching, which is essentially an animation technique that dynamically selects and blends animations from a database based on a character's movement and trajectory. It takes all the input and data in from your direction and the state of the character and selects the most relevant animation. It aims to create a more responsive and realistic system by continuously querying the animation poses rather than relying on predefined transitions or state machines. It's an extremely cool system and one that is very, very expensive and forbidden for small budget indies like us. Or at least it was. Thanks to the graces of the God Emperor Unreal Engine, my indie team can now, for free, create an amazing looking movement system using motion matching. It is very basic, it doesn't have all the fancy things we'll need like swings or beam jumps, but it'll give us our walk, our run, our crouch, and our jump. And that's all we need to start giving Silas a vibe. Now, I'll jump in here quickly and go into live nerd mode for a second to talk about something called input control. Many games, usually those that don't put as much emphasis on movement, will have the character automatically jog or sprint when you press forward on your controller. Sometimes they will let you control the speed of the character depending on how far you push the joystick, but it's a rare case, and even this binary way of approaching character locomotion is cringe. 1, because it's too easy, and 2, because it rids you of player autonomy. You need to give the players the ability to traverse an environment or a level at the speed that they want, whether it's for strategy, self-expression, or immersion. If you want to calmly walk the streets of Port Midas, you should be able to. If you want to sprint through the final level of the game in the Grand Citadel, you should be able to. So what we're going to do is divide Silas into 2 states of being, passive state and active state. Passive state is where Silas begins. This is like his usual state. He walks when you move him, he vaults over objects slowly, the camera will slowly zoom in if you walk for long enough to kind of give you more of like an immersive feel, and it's how Silas normally moves around the world. But if you hold down right trigger, voila, Silas enters his active state. Here he sprints, he jumps further, he vaults quicker, and does all the cool parkour shit that we all want him to do. I think it's, for me, really important to give players the ability because, again, our movement system is designed to make you feel like an Octari, this political assassin that Silas has been trained as and used to be. And you get to choose how you feel that way with the tools we give you. If you want to walk down street level and only run on the rooftops, you should be able to do that. So, with a little bit of magic, a little bit of coding, and a lot of frustration, we have running, vaulting, and manual jumps, all from this motion matching free animation sample that Daddy Unreal gave to us. Our Eastern European lead programmers decided to kind of take the animations and build the logic for the motion matching from scratch, since, according to him, gas sucks dick.
Avi? What's Boris doing? Boris, what are you doing here?
So, with that problem solved and the homegrown locomotion system, we started adding mantling. So here's Silas running around his little grey world, climbing little grey boxes. I know it's not much, but honestly it is exciting to have a character that's existed so long in your head for ages suddenly come alive, even in such a simple way. Okay, so this is editing Iggy, as you can tell from my atrocious haircut. I just wanted to jump in and kind of dive deeper into the implications that it has to divide Silas into this active state and passive state, and what happens when you try and prioritize momentum in the game and the kind of complications that arise. So, as I mentioned in the video, when Silas is basically moving at different speeds, different animations are going to be triggered when he has a parkour action. So if you see, for example, here these vaultings, if he walks towards them walking, you can see how the vault is slower. Sometimes he triggers this like different animation that only happens when you're walking, because what we're prioritizing in this game is momentum. And you can see that if I start to sprint with Silas and do the same vaults over the same obstacles, the vaults are much faster, they're different animations, and they look completely different and feel completely different, because again, you're triggering these animations based on the preservation of momentum, which is a very important thing for the game. And this is relatively easy to achieve with these free animations that Unreal Engine have given us, because they kind of factored that into the animations and the whole pack that they gave us. And you can probably see this as well in the mantling. Like, for example, if I walk towards this and then trigger the mantle, you see how Silas kind of like hops on in a slower and more burdensome fashion. Whereas if I'm sprinting and I jump on, you can see how quick and swift that was compared to the other one. And that's kind of the core or the foundation of the movement system. I think you can see it here as well. Like if I'm stuck to the wall like this, quite slow. And if I run and sprint and go up, you can see how he's adjusting his position and adjusting his speed to be much quicker and preserve that momentum. And all of that is pretty accessible with these baseline animations. But what happens when we want to add more animations? Because we're trying to get a really fleshed out and in-depth parkour system. So take this window, for example, here. This is a window that when Silas crosses it, triggers a very specific animation. And we want to pepper it around the map just so you have kind of like variation animations and variation in parkour moves. Some are more contextual, some are more free. Like, for example, you have a manual jump. You can trigger literally wherever you want. And then you have more contextual animations like this window dive. So if Silas is running and you dive through this, he'll perform this really cool like dive and roll that, again, makes sense when Silas is sprinting. It's a really cool way of kind of like adding some parkour obstacles to your run, and I think it's just incredibly fun. But it would make no sense for Silas to dive like that if you were walking towards the window, because again, it would just ruin the sense of momentum, and it would feel weird. And also, if there's an enemy on the other side and you want to slowly walk to it, if suddenly you walk in and he does a huge dive, it kind of breaks immersion a little bit. So what we do in this case is basically, if Silas is walking towards it at a walking pace, instead of it doing a dive, he does this little hop. And it just looks much more in line with what we're trying to do. So that's why we want to divide Silas into these two states. We have the walking state that you see here, and then after walking for a few seconds, if you're walking down the city, it'll zoom in a bit. I think right now it zooms in a bit too much, so we're going to work on that. But if you then trigger the right trigger on the controller, he'll start sprinting, the camera will move away, and then the actions that you'll take will kind of maintain momentum the entire time, kind of like that. So yeah. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about, and now we can get back to the video. From here, we kind of polish the system, make sure that the animations blend smoothly, that the momentum from sprinting, vaulting, and back into sprinting is kept so the game feel works well. And we add things like predictive jumps, so whenever objects are close enough, Silas just kind of jumps to it. And we also add beam jumps. And as you can see, the beam jumps look like shit, which means we need to go to a mocap studio and sort that out. But that's a story for another time. For now, we're trying to build out the basics of the locomotion system. There's a couple random things we also added just to spice it up. For example, you can dive through certain windows and squeeze yourself through locked doors. You can slide through tight barriers and slide on the tables. And essentially, all these kind of like premeditated objects that create a certain animation or action are elements that we can sprinkle around the interiors and exteriors for the player to be constantly engaged when they're doing a parkour line. So that's kind of phase one of parkour. We kind of gave Silas the ability to walk, to sprint, to jump, to do all the basic things, and then added a few objects that trigger a few animations just to make the movement more interesting and make the quote-unquote obstacles in front of you a little bit more engaging. So I hope you've enjoyed that little deep dive into how we're trying to build this parkour and deliver that assassin fantasy through our movement system. And if you want to learn more about who Silas is as a character, you can watch the video that's appearing on your screen now.